Broadcasting from the Cass Corridor in Detroit, it's the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the program, hunting season is underway. What does hunting look like for folks who've been historically left out of this space?
And how are they taking it back?
Also, Detroit documenters pay us a visit later in the show to discuss some changes to public comment process at Detroit school board meetings.
Some say those changes could have a chilling effect on free speech. But first, since Michigan legalized recreational pot 5 years ago, weed edibles have been getting into smaller and smaller hands. From 2020 to 2022, the Michigan Poison and Drug Information Center recorded a 75% increase statewide in unintentional youth cannabis ingestion. Here's Dr. Kelly Lavasser, Chief of Pediatric Emergency Medicine at Children's Hospital of Michigan, back in the spring.
Essentially, since marijuana was legalized in Michigan, we have seen a significant increase in number of young children coming in after they've gotten into usually some type of an edible marijuana product. And it's so common now that I talk with some of the docs that I work with. I mean, we can almost recognize these kids when they're walking down the hallway.
Now, what really brought this problem to the forefront was a letter that Detroit Public Schools Superintendent Nikolai Vitti wrote to lawmakers back in May. He said cannabis use is sending students to the hospital nearly every week. This grabbed the attention of Detroit City Council members. It was also around the same time that a 9-year-old testified before the council about all the weed advertisements he sees in the city. Now, Detroit City Council member Angela Whitfield-Calloway is leading an effort to keep those advertisements out of sight from kids. But does her ordinance do enough? Councilmember Whitfield-Calloway joins us now. Welcome to the Metro.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Vincent. Thank you for having me.
So Detroit has changed a lot when it comes to the rise of cannabis culture. What have you observed in our city about those changes, Councilmember?
You know what? First of all, again, thank you for having me. And I'm just really concerned about the children, our students, our youth. Having access to marijuana, having to see it every single day when they're going to school or returning home from school, because we have over-proliferation of the billboards. They're everywhere. They're in our neighborhoods. They're next to daycare centers. They're in the communities where schools are located. They are near churches. And I was told that they weren't, but I've located 2 that are. So I'm just very, very concerned about the access and the exposure to those billboards and the messages that they send to children, like it's okay, this is good. And then the ones that say the cannabis is free, well, if it's free, you know, that makes it even more enticing and appealing. So I'm very, very concerned about that.
Councilmember Whitfield-Calloway, you said you've seen 2 that are located near churches. I wonder how many others you think would be affected by this ordinance. How many others might come down?
Well, you know what? I'm not sure because I don't know the number of the billboards in the city, but that's part of the ordinance. We have to find out exactly where they're located, and they cannot be located within 1,000 feet of a school, a church, a playground, a playfield, a recreation center. And we don't know how many there are. At least I'm not aware of how many there are, but that's part of the ordinance. We have to drill down. We have to find out where they're located and whether or not they'll be in violation of the 1,000 feet ordinance. That would be the restriction.
Talk about the marijuana ordinance that's currently on the books, what it does and what it doesn't do.
Well, it doesn't address this issue. Right now, you can put up billboards, obviously, wherever you want them. And this is just an amendment to the ordinance. Right now, the only ordinance that I'm aware of that we have on the books is the one restricting when and where tobacco and alcohol-related product billboards can be located. This is just simply going to amend that ordinance that's already on the books, and I think it's also going to include vaping. I'm working with my colleague to make sure that it also includes vaping and marijuana products.
And we should note that that letter that Superintendent Nikolai Vidi issued, it was also about vaping and how pervasive that has become in Detroit schools too, but certainly not just in Detroit schools. This is a statewide issue when we think about cannabis use among kids and vaping. Now, Council Member Whitfield-Calloway, I do want to play a clip from Superintendent Vidi. This was shortly after he issued that plea to lawmakers that I just mentioned about the problem of kids using cannabis.
There needs to be more conversations, more thoughtfulness, and more guardrails put in place so we're protecting our youth as we have better protected adults with the criminalization of marijuana. Now we have to protect our youth with the decriminalization of marijuana.
So Superintendent Vidi is alluding to the fact that decriminalizing marijuana was an important measure when we consider the numbers of Black and brown folks who've been swept into the criminal justice system for weed, for these nonviolent actions. Now, recreational cannabis is a new frontier for Detroit and more broadly for Michigan. I wonder, do you think there was enough thought at the local and state level about how this could affect kids?
Obviously not. Obviously not, because a lot of times, I come from an education background. I worked for Detroit Public School Community District for 17 years, and then I went on to work for a charter school. And when you open up a door, so you have to go out there and greet the children, make sure they get out of their cars. It's smoke. It's weed smoke. So the children are inhaling the smoke from the weed that whoever's dropping them off is smoking in their presence. Then I think maybe several months ago, we had a 13 or 14-year-old who went into a store, a cannabis retail shop, and bought marijuana. You can also, the kids are buying vaping products. I've seen it to our building safety and engineering department. I've seen a gasoline station in my community selling vaping products to students. They don't even ID them. So we have a huge issue in our city. And I'm not blaming anybody, but now that we recognize that there are some problems that probably were not thought about when we put all these things in place, all these laws, now they're here, they're facing us, they're smacking our face. We have to deal with it now. We didn't deal with it on the front end. Now we have to deal with it on the back end because there are a host of issues. We had 1,700 children who have, I think they've gone to emergency because of weed-related or vaping-related issues where they've had episodes and breakdowns. They've gone to emergency rooms. That came from Superintendent Vidi. We had a young man that comes before the council this past May, 11 years old. He missed school to appear before the council to tell us, look, I'm concerned. We got to do something. He said, I'm concerned about my friends. And we're seeing these billboards everywhere. That touched my heart. We got to do better by our students, our youth. They're being, to me, exposed to it at an early age and sometimes in their homes.
So that brings us to this moment, Council Member. Yeah. This ordinance that you've been working on to address the problem of young people using cannabis, I want to reiterate for listeners that it would prohibit advertisements within 1,000 feet of places like schools, libraries, parks. So it would treat cannabis advertisements the same way that we treat alcohol and tobacco ads, as you've mentioned. But my question to you is 1,000 feet enough?
No, I don't think it's enough. If I had my way, Ms. Benson, and I know about, your right to free speech, I understand the amendments of the Constitution, but we gotta protect our children. We have to put them before profit. Put them before profit. We have one cannabis business owner. He has billboards everywhere. We don't have to say his name. You can just say the colors, the yellow, the red, the yellow, the purple, and the green billboards. They are absolutely all along the freeways in all of our cities in the state of Michigan, if you're traveling down 75 and 94, and they're in the city of Detroit. They're now downtown on the side of buildings. Some businesses have allowed them to advertise on the side of their buildings. We have a huge problem. We have to look. We didn't think about it before. We did not, to me, we didn't have the conversations about the impact on our children and our students. But now those conversations are in our face. We have to drill down and we have to have these very, very tough discussions and put the safety and health and well-being of our students before the cannabis owners profit.
This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent alongside Tia Graham. We're speaking with Detroit City Council member Angela Whitfield-Calloway about curbing cannabis use among kids. Now, council member, Detroit received the highest amount of money this year from the marijuana excise tax, and that's because it has the most dispensaries. Now, in addition to that, there's also a state fund that received roughly $100 million in state cannabis taxes, and that goes to K through 12 education. Councilmember Whitfield-Calloway, of those millions in the state fund, I'm uncertain how much of that is going to Detroit schools. I wonder if you know the answer.
I do not know the answer, but I'm going to find out the answer. And when I find out the answer, I'm going to let you know. And I want to know exactly the amount and how is it being used. Because apparently it's not being used in a responsible way, because the students are still coming to school high, still going into the restrooms, smoking weed. I still have friends in the school district, so I know what I'm talking about. They're coming to school smelling like weed. They're walking to school smoking weed. They're going back home smoking weed. They're getting out of vehicles, and the vehicle is smelling like weed. So we have a problem. And no, Robin, we did not think about this before we put all these laws in place. We didn't do it. When we were making these laws, the children were absolutely not a part of those conversations. Because had we thought about it, we wouldn't be having this conversation today.
Let's stay on the notion of prevention. Your office posed some questions about that to the city council back in June. I want to follow up on two of those questions. So one was, what programs is the Detroit Health Department leading for youth substance prevention, abuse prevention, and how many kids have been reached? Did you get answers to that?
I have not gotten those answers, Robin, and thank you for bringing that back to the forefront of my mind, and I'm going to get the answers to those questions today, because to my knowledge, I have not received the answers to those questions.
So then you didn't receive an answer to another question you had, which is, how is the city health department spending the 2% of marijuana tax revenue that it receives for youth substance prevention?
I cannot answer that question, and I apologize. I cannot answer that question. That's not to say they didn't give me the answer, but had they given me the answer, I would be able to answer that question. So that's two questions that I'll have to, revisit.
Sure. I guess my last question to you, Council Member Whitfield-Calloway, this is a new frontier for us, but it's not a new frontier for other cities, for other states. So have you been looking at what any other cities are doing, what they've been able to do in terms of trying to address this problem? Because again, it feels like this moment where a lot of leaders are having to move into this reactionary mode. But again, we know that this has been a problem in other places, and one that has been addressed in other places.
I'm not sure what the other places are that have addressed this issue regarding
Denver comes to mind for me. I'm just thinking of one because Colorado was one of the first to legalize cannabis.
Yeah, that you're just giving me some homework, Robin. I'll have to look into it. But you've given me some homework. You've given me 3 assignments, and you have my word on. When we talk again, I'll have the answers to those questions, and I'm hoping we can talk again real soon, because after we hang up, I'm going to call my office, and I'm going to look in my emails to see if I've gotten those answers to those 2 questions that I had given the health department to answer. And then I'm going to find out what other cities are doing to address the issues with the youth. We have to come up with something, because right now what we have is not working, because we don't have anything. And the children are going to the emergency room because they're having episodes. They're having adverse reactions to the use of marijuana and vaping. And I heard what you were saying earlier with the edibles.
Yep.
The edibles, and I've seen them. You can buy bags. They look like teddy bears. They look like gummy bears. But they're edibles.
Right. That's right.
And you can go in gasoline stations and buy some edibles, and you can also buy vaping products.
Well,
so,
yes. Council Member Whitfield-Calloway.
We got work to do.
We do. It sounds like it, and we'll be interested to hear from you again about the answers to some of the things we talked about today. Detroit City Council Member Angela Whitfield-Calloway, thank you so much for joining the Metro.
Thank you for caring, Ms. Vincent. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts and to answer some of your questions. Thank you.
This is the Metro on WDET FM from the WDET newsroom. State officials changed hunting regulations in an effort to bring down deer populations, especially in southeastern Michigan. Overpopulation has led to more car accidents, more disease, and more problems for farmers and gardeners who grow just the perfect snacks for deer. Unfortunately, experts say it's unlikely those regulation changes would do much to solve the overpopulation problem. Now, coming up, it is deer hunting season in Michigan, and we'll discuss what that looks like this year and the people attempting to make the space more inclusive. Stay right there.
Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. And a lot of us Michiganders understand what hunting season means. For some, it's literally a way of life, the way the wild game helps feed their families during the winter months and beyond. And for others who hunt deer for sport, like our own executive producer David Lyons, he's out right now hunting during the firearm deer hunting season, which began today. And personally, my connection to deer is avoiding them on the roads. But but as deer hunting continues to evolve, there are increased efforts to improve diversity in the sport as well. Antonio Cosme is a co-founder of Black to Land Coalition. He is also the land stewardship manager for the Friends of Rouge Park in Detroit. Welcome back to the Metro, Antonio.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing really well. And then we have Andrea Cresce. She is the Global Kids Program Coordinator, as well as an avid hunter. I want to say that you are you're the project coordinator for our Global Kids. Want to get your title right for the audience. Andrea, thank you so much for being here with us on the Metro.
Hi, thank you. Excited to be here.
Yay. So, Antonio, we've talked a few times in the past about just deer and just, Rouge Park in general, but the deer population in Rouge Park and in Detroit in general. Overpopulation we see. So what are we seeing throughout the city of Detroit in terms of our deer population?
So as some of the spaces become more and more open, Detroit's obviously gone through like 60, 70 years of capital flight. The banks took a lot of houses. Those houses have been torn down. There's a lot more green spaces open up in the city. Yeah. There's been a lot of like popularization of the pheasants, and there's a lot of like movies and interesting things that come out about that. But deer have also been, coming increasingly into the city. And you're also finding that certain neighboring communities like Southfield have actually voted down doing their own deer culls. Oh. So up and down the Rouge watershed and certain parts of the east side, you'll find populations of urban deer who are coming and engaging with our neighborhoods.
Yes, urban deer. And, the urban deer population, they're definitely not afraid of being around people and being around cars. And so just a little note for folks who are in those urban populations or around the urban deer, what are some notes that they should know and some little tidbits?
Yeah, I think it's not like safe to just like come up and like have like a Snow White moment with deer. I saw this like hilarious video online of somebody who was like encouraging their child to feed a deer by hand, and this deer just like mowed the child over. This is a particularly compelling time of the year as the male deer are kind of going into rut. So they're like kind of urinating on their back legs and getting the glands all excited, putting out scent and looking for female deer and fighting other male deer. So it's definitely not a time where you want to be getting close. If ever. You never want to be getting close. But you got to look out in certain areas, particularly like deer are edge creatures. They tend to love like that area where there's like some trees and some open field and prairie. If you're near a big park or a watershed or a creek, it's definitely smart to be careful, particularly at nighttime when you see deer.
Mm-hmm. And Andrea, bringing you into the conversation, thinking about deer hunting season in general, why is it so important, especially to have a deer hunting season during in Detroit and southeastern Michigan, especially right now when we're seeing overpopulation?
It definitely helps with conservation and keeping these areas safe in the terms of like trying to avoid car accidents, or there's a disease right now called CWD, which is chronic waste disease, which is something a lot of deer are experiencing, and it makes them a little unpredictable in the sense. that you're not really sure how they're going to react. So just being mindful of that right now as well. But by being able to hunt and kind of manage these populations helps to kind of limit those liabilities and things that could happen.
And thinking about urban deer, or thinking about the population that's in Detroit and southeastern Michigan, like you said, Southfield and some other of our neighboring communities of Detroit, where do you actually hunt them here in southeastern Michigan? Where do you go? We can start with you, Antonio.
So it's actually pretty challenging to hunt close to Detroit, as there isn't like a lot of opportunities and spaces for it. There's like certain public lands. There's a really great app that I use called Onyx Hunting. And it's like you can actually look at all the private property owners, but the best place is private property in near the city. So like farms, farms are the best spots. Like there's some of the metro parks allow you to hunt there, but hunting public land is a real big challenge because so many people hunt it. So many people are there hiking, walking. It kind of like tends to like disturb the deer populations. Yeah. You're also just competing for hunting blinds and good hunting spots with, thousands of people.
Oh, wow.
So private land is definitely the best places in and around the Metro Detroit area.
Which is really, really interesting. Once again, I was just very curious in that question myself. I see the deer population is growing in the city of Detroit, but why, what are the ways that the city or even conservation groups or anyone who's interested in reducing the deer population, what are we doing to reduce that deer population? You talked a little bit about culling, but I want to get to you really quickly, Andrea, about some of your spots of hunting in southeastern Michigan or even around this area if you do.
Yeah, so I've been lucky enough to be able to go to friends' properties, or my parents bought a property in Gladwin, Michigan, and we basically use that now to connect other people and groups to be able to hunt on private land versus having to compete for spots, like you said, with state lands that could also be potentially dangerous because some people get really hyped up about hunting season. So being able to have that private land and be able to be with people that have the experience and education to help them with a lot of first-time hunters is usually the way to go.
And it's like the perfect segue there. But Antonio, we talked about the deer culling. You talked about that the last time you were here, and that was something that we really wanted to talk about because you said that was something that needs to happen in order to reduce this population, especially in Detroit, especially in Rouge Park. So go ahead.
Yeah, Palmer Park too. I mean, there's a lot of parks around the city where the deer population is so large. They're doing a lot of damage to trees. We just planted 100 fruit and nut trees in our park, and I was out there surveying them, and a good percentage of them have been damaged by deers in the rut who are just like kind of rubbing on them, rubbing their sands, taking like the felt off their antlers and such. So it's like deers do damage to trees. They also if you go to Rouge Park in the springtime and you're aware of spring ephemeral flowers, Trillium is a really common, very popular spring ephemeral flower. You'll be hard pressed to find one throughout the entire park, and that was not the case 10 years ago. But the deer population has really exploded. But a big part of that is with the settler European Americans' orientation towards killing wolves. I mean, we need another species to help manage the population, and we just don't have wolves that much anymore in Southeast Michigan. So there isn't anything to check that population. So it's up to the communities where these deer are moving through to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
The city of Detroit brought in the USDA to do a survey and look around Rouge Park to talk about doing a deer call. There was some interest with somebody in City Hall, but they haven't followed through. And I really think the City Hall and the city of Detroit really needs to follow through and bring in the USDA to do a deer call. In long term, I personally would love it if they would allow us to do an archery season for goose and deer in the city of Detroit. Goose in particular, they're everywhere. I mean, they used to be an endangered species. They're no longer that. Their feces is crowding out our parks. They eat grass shoots. We do nothing but mow lawn in our society, which I think is a totally separate topic.
I know.
A bad thing.
That we're not going to get into it.
But if we're going to create habitat for them, we have to do something to manage their populations.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And once again, we can get into the grass and the mowing and all of that on another topic, another conversation. But if you are listening to the Metro on Detroit Public Radio, I'm Tia Graham with Robin Vincent. We're chatting with Antonio Cosme, co-founder of Black to Land Coalition. Andrea Cresce is the project coordinator for Our Global Kids. And I do want to talk about, bringing in Black and brown hunters into the sport of hunting and bringing Black and brown people into outdoor enthusiasm, being happy about being outdoor and doing activities. And there's this misconception that Black and brown people aren't interested in hunting or, just don't have the know-how or where, how to do it. So, Antonio, starting with you, and we're going to come right to you, Andrea, because you talked about the private land that you own, and I'm assuming that's one of the reasons. So perfect. So, Antonio, Black to Land Coalition, that's what you guys do. That's your goal. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think oftentimes, we're at the center and the front line of so many, climate change, environmental racism. People are really negatively impacted by the environment in our communities. But we don't often have the privilege or the opportunity to build a real relationship with lands in a meaningful way. And I think the metro parks are all 30, 40 minutes away. If you don't have car insurance, it's hard to get there. There are definitely some nice, high-quality nature areas in the city, but generally speaking, the highest quality nature areas in the Metro Detroit area are those here in Clinton Metro Parks. I mean, they're big and beautiful and sprawling. Yeah. So many different recreational outdoor opportunities there, from mountain biking to archery, and there's a lot. You can do that in the city in Rouge too, but it takes something to get there. Mm-hmm. And one of our big philosophies with Black to Land is if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go, far, go together. Mm-hmm. So we really want to find ways to reduce those barriers to entry by having an expert in mushroom foraging accompany a bunch of people in foraging to, have that first initial experience. Setting up a nearby camping thing. We did something at Kensington Metro Park last year for people who don't have the opportunity to camp and have never gone camping before. So we're just kind of opening it up with kayaking, hiking, foraging, hunting, fishing. We lead some fishing opportunities in the springtime down at the International Wildlife Refuge and along the Detroit Riverwalk. Mm-hmm. So we're really looking to get in every single way. Just recently, we hosted a hunter safety course where we actually paid for people to take the hunter safety course, and we made sure to have instructors who actually look like the communities we're working with. And that's definitely part of this partnership we're developing with the DeCrease family. Yeah. I mean, her father's a well-known environmental educator in the city of Detroit, and I just had to, shout that out. And we're super happy to be partnering with them in the DNR, and I'll let you talk more about that.
Yes, Andrea, please, because this is something that we talk about. A lot of times Black and brown people may not even feel comfortable going to the spaces where hunting is allowed. So, let's talk about creating those spaces.
So 2008, my parents created Our Global Kids with the goal of pretty much empowering youth through education, leadership, and outdoor activities. And from that, we did archery programs. We started hunter certifications. We did CPL training. We took families up to the UP for a week and introduced them to all these outdoor activities that you may not be able to do here in the city. And it's more so giving them this experience so that they can grow that interest. So with the archery programs, that was a great way for us to show them that you can do this competitively, and it can also enter you into the world of conservation and hunting if that's something you're interested in. But it's more so giving them the chance to experience, which a lot of them did. We started a lot of programs in downtown Detroit. We had about 20 archery teams that we created throughout the Michigan area that now continues and has whole entire high school competitions. And it's a lot of fun, and it's a great sport for kids, but it's also a great introduction to the world of hunting and conservation.
That's just so big. It's such a huge thing because, once again, growing up, you often heard, how far up have you gone in Michigan? If you're from the city of Detroit, how far up have you gone before? And a lot of us, not very far. I mean, most of us, me was Traverse City at one point, it was as furthest north that I had gone in Michigan. So taking a group of folks from the city of Detroit, especially young kids, out of the city into these spaces, can you talk about the growth that you're seeing in these young people when you are taking them out and expanding their minds and getting them interacting with what's happening outdoors?
Oh, yeah. It's been awesome. My dad was a teacher at University Preparatory Academy. Yeah. And that is where this kind of stemmed from. We were a very, very big family unit, and it was getting these kids. We didn't just take the kids. You're bringing mom, dad, brother, sister. Everyone came up to the UP with us. We did pictured rocks, but it was just a great way for them to just get realize that they were interested in it, because you don't know unless you get to try. And it kind of was able to stem from there. They were able to try different programs. So we did a Hunger Games program that my dad created, which when Hunger Games came out, a lot of little girls got interested. So we started working with Girl Scout programs and did a whole entire wild edibles and foraging, like you mentioned, and medicinal plants in Michigan. So there's a lot of things to do and there's a lot of opportunities. It's just a matter of getting it to them.
Yes. I just love the conversation. I love a little bunch of Katnisses running around trying to conquer the world. I love that. But before I let you both go, just talking about bringing it back to deer hunting season. Firearm season did start for deer hunting. And I just, for folks, because you were just talking about helping people get licenses and the hunting and teaching. So what are some of the ways that you all are prepping folks, especially first-time hunters, especially first-time Black and brown hunters, getting prepared for their first time deer hunting?
Yeah, so this is our first time offering a hunter safety course, and we're definitely going to be intending to do that more in the future, and we'll certainly be partnering with the Cresce family. We intend, in our Global Kids, we definitely intend to, we have a Hunters of Color network gathering happening next Tuesday, so folks can check us out on Instagram, Black to the Land Coalition. We'll be posting that more details for that, but we just want to create a network, create some support opportunities. We're really interested in helping urban hunters get access to private land. That's something that we are particularly interested in because that is going to be your best opportunity to hunt deer. That's just the way the system we live in. The private land tends to be the best land to hunt nearby Detroit, and we want to reduce those barriers.
Anything for first-time hunters?
If you have any friends, always try to reach out to them and see if you can get these opportunities. Like you said, reach out to either of our organizations. We will be hosting Black to the Land, and we have 100+ acres in Gladwin that we've been working on for the last 7-8 years to create just a space for people to feel comfortable and safe to be able to have their first hunting experience.
I love it so much. Antonio Cosme is the co-founder of Black to Land Coalition. He is also the land stewardship manager for the Friends of Rouge Park. And Andrea DeCreci is the project coordinator for Our Global Kids. I want to say thank you both for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks for having us.
Miigwech.
Coming up, Macomb County residents came out in even higher numbers to support President-elect Donald Trump this election in comparison to 2020. We'll find out why when we talk with Macomb County Executive Mark Hackel. That's next. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. It's been said Macomb is a swing county, and what's expressed there is echoed across the nation. That's been true in previous elections, and on Tuesday, November 5th, it was proven to be true again, as a lot of people came out to vote for President-elect Donald Trump.
In Michigan, many of those voters were in Macomb County. 20,000 more residents there voted for him this time as compared to 2020. So, what are we to make of Macomb County residents' support of Trump? And if you're living in Macomb County, what kind of political messages appeal to you?
Macomb County Executive Mark Hackel has some thoughts on this. Hackel has been leading Macomb County since 2011. Before that, he was county sheriff. Executive Hackel, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Tia.
So Trump has won Macomb County twice now, this time even more than last. What do residents of Macomb County like about him?
I think it's actually interesting. He actually won 3 times. I mean, he won the time when he was running against Hillary Clinton, and then he actually won when he ran against Joe Biden in Macomb County, and then obviously this time as well. But much more significantly this time than the other 2, which was interesting to me too. I kind of keep an eye on that. Again, when people ask, what is it? I don't think there's this cult of personality that people are very excited about Trump. It's just, unfortunately, I think the Democrats have been challenged with trying to get to the Macomb County voters to really get them to understand what their plan is and to really connect with them. And many a time, they have not even showed up in Macomb County. Biden was the only one that really would come to Macomb County. Hillary Clinton never showed up in Macomb County when she ran. I mean, just didn't come and campaign. And that was pretty much the same thing this time around as well with Harris. But Trump is everywhere. I mean, it was every time you look around the county, you see signs in areas that I grew up in. And that was the southern part of Macomb County, Warren, Centerline. And when you see that, you come to the realization something is happening here, and the party just isn't listening. They're not really interested in wanting to hear what's going to happen. They just assume that blue collar worker, the union worker, folks are going to go ahead and support them. So
that was my question. Yeah, it's going to be my question. Is there an assumption happening right now, do you believe, within the Democratic Party that, we're going to get that vote because that's just the way it is?
I feel that way.
Yeah.
I do believe that. And that's very unfortunate. It's like I tend to look back, Clinton had a cult of personality that just swept Macomb County. I mean, people adored him. That was very interesting. And same with Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was this interest in, his personality, and he showed up at Macomb County. He was at Macomb Community College. I met both of those two candidates numerous times back when I was a sheriff. My job of dealing with their security when they were in Macomb County. But beyond that, I've had that opportunity to engage with both of them. And the minute they walked away, you felt like they were your best friend. There was some kind of a connection that people had with them. But the Democrats have been challenged with trying to, recapture that, and get people to believe that they're listening. And that's the unfortunate challenge that they're going to have moving forward, too.
Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of auto workers in Macomb County. That includes people who run auto shops and work in auto suppliers. And the leadership of some of these organizations, like the union leaders, for example, supported Harris. But many union workers supported Trump, despite Biden supporting auto workers and walking alongside them during their months-long strike for higher pay. So why do you think that is?
Very interesting. Sean Fain did a great job trying to get out there and try to get people to support, the administration. And, it just fell short. And I think it's because the workers, albeit they may have given the endorsement on behalf of the UAW, the workers, they were very challenged with the message. And, I heard it. I've seen it. I've been in Macomb County all my life. I've been running for the past 24 years for office. And I do hear, and I hear, the voters, and you kind of get an understanding what they're looking for. And they're incredibly, I guess, disenfranchised by the hyper-partisan nature of what's going on with politics to begin with. They don't want to hear about the far right, the far left. I think the prior show, there was a gentleman that was on here. I was listening to him. His name was, I think it was Lee. He was talking on the show. And, boy, he hit it head on when he started talking about, this independent nature. Can they break through? I think what you're finding is people that are candidates running for office that are more concerned about, their primaries. Yeah. And so with that, they got to figure out, they got to have a strong allegiance to one side or the other. But yet the general population of the public, I think they're just they're at a point now where it's like, just give us a candidate that we believe is listening to us and is willing to kind of go out there and try to challenge the others and make things happen within our communities. And I think that's what's happened with the blue collar worker, the auto workers. They're just looking for somebody that really is going to listen to them and help them with their day-to-day issues.
Executive Hackle, talk more about what you see as the issues specifically that concern most Macomb County voters beyond just feeling that they're not being heard.
Yeah, I think it's infrastructure, mental health, substance use issues. I think people are very concerned about those particular concerns. They're looking at what are we doing about defense spending, their opportunities there, the economy. I mean, that's always something that's front and center. Looking at their bills. What are the cost of everything right now, and the future of where we're headed as a country. So all these other things that people keep wanting to. The Democrats wanted you to dislike Trump, and they kept trying to point it out. And I think the voters in Macomb County were saying, okay, we know all those things. There are things that we don't like, but we want to know what you're standing for and what you're doing to move the country forward, or what you're willing to do, because they weren't happy with where it was at right now. And I don't think Kamala Harris did a good job of that. They talk about The View, the interview that she had there where she said, she wouldn't change a thing. Well, I think that was very challenging for her, with the voters in Macomb County.
When you talk about infrastructure, though, President Biden did a lot of meaningful work when it comes to infrastructure. And I was hearing this described yesterday on NPR that it was an inside joke when President-elect Trump declared Infrastructure Week, that was sort of laughable because of how little ended up being done under his administration and how much that was in contrast to what the Democrats were able to do. So this takes me back to something you've already said, which is that the Democrats had a messaging problem.
Yeah, again, I'll go back to infrastructure just real quick if I could. We got Mound Road fixed under an infra grant, but that came through the Trump administration. So, people in Macomb County were extremely excited about that funding level that came our way. But with that being said, the messaging itself, I think they were confused. I don't think there really was a message that was coming out of the current administration or Kamala Harris herself that touched Macomb County folks, that grabbed them. Obviously, you look at the results, that's the case. And in Macomb County, there's about 35,000 more straight ticket votes for Republicans than there were for the Democrats. That was harmful. So, I think you had a lot of, there wasn't a lot of people out there, believe it or not, campaigning on behalf of Trump as far as elected officials. They didn't have people that were our personalities, or, there wasn't a lot of push to try to figure out how do you get people to want to vote for Trump. Even the countywides that were Republicans were now out there pushing Trump, and the Democrats weren't either. I think what you found is a lot of the candidates were trying to stay away from either side of that while they were running because they wanted to stay out of harm's way. I tend to look at Slotkin. She did a great job of trying to navigate the politics at the national level, even though she's in the national level. Yeah. She didn't get involved in talking about either one of the candidates. She talked about former presidential candidates in some of her commercials, and I think she did a masterful job of that, which I think is the reason why she ended up getting elected, as a new congresswoman.
Sure. I mean, she highlighted that she's worked for both sides of the political spectrum, and it was a message that certainly resonated. I wonder if you could talk more about what you think specifically voters in Macomb County believe Donald Trump is going to do for them that Harris couldn't. You mentioned infrastructure, as we just talked about, defense spending, the economy. So your sense is that folks in Macomb County think defense spending is going to go down as Trump has promised, and that the economy is going to become stronger. What else?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's going to go down. I think we're hopeful that it's going to be increased. So again, I don't know what it was that they're looking at when they said, Donald Trump.
He wants to end wars. So that in terms of defense spending in that way, I guess I should clarify.
Well, again, one could look at that and say, okay, does that mean that he's going to increase, what we're doing with our military, our nation's defense, which I think would be impactful because you're going to have folks thinking, okay, they've got a strong military. We don't really want to get into a war. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. So when somebody says, is that what he's thinking about, ending wars? Boy, there's no question about it. Enhanced spending for defense, our nation's defense, is critically important. And I think especially right now, seeing what's happening around the globe. So I would encourage any candidate who's looking to run for president in the future, or obviously at a national level, to focus on that. And I think it's just as a message to other countries that we're here, we're prepared, we're ready, because nothing is going to be happening here on our homeland ever again. We don't want that to happen. But if you're not prepared, you become vulnerable. And so I do believe there's going to be an increased interest in doing that. Selfridge Air Base, we continue to fight for fighters over at Selfridge Air Base. We're losing those A-10s coming 2027. So we are looking for that replacement, and I know that we have our counterparts. Gary Peters has been a leader in that area to try to figure out how do we continue to, it gives guarantee that there's going to be some type of a mission at Selfridge Air Base. So it increases, obviously, our nation's defense.
Yes, indeedy. Macomb County Executive Mark Hackle, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. We look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you again. Appreciate you.
Coming up, the Detroit School Board has been considering changes to the public comment process. Some worry those changes could have a chilling effect on free speech. You all stay right there. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. It's Detroit Documenters Friday on the Metro. The Detroit Documenters play a crucial role in improving our access to public information. They're at all the city's public meetings, taking notes on what leaders and community members are saying.
And what they're not saying, or what might not be said in the future. That brings us to some recent Detroit School Board meetings. Public comment dominates these meetings, often stretching for an hour or two. And sometimes this time period is pure drama, to be sure.
But the board could soon be making changes to its public comment process that some worry could have a chilling effect on free speech. They could eliminate virtual public comments. They also could require people to fill out a form and give their name, community they live in, and note whether they've used the district's complaint process to try and resolve their issue, and more information. Now, some of those processes are already in place, but this would codify them.
To discuss what this all means, we have Detroit Documenters Coordinator Linnell Hurden in the studio. Linnell, welcome back to the Metro.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So let's set the scene for folks. What does the public comment process look like during school board meetings? It can get pretty heated. Is that right, Linnell?
Yeah, I would say DPSCD community members are probably some of the liveliest public commenters.
Indeed.
We've heard. Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
It's long. They've got some passion. I mean, but these people are talking about their kids, their students.
Sure.
Yeah, so.
And they summon some theatrics. And I know in the past it has been even more lively. Some might say aggressive. My former editor at Chalkbeat Detroit, Lori Higgins, has told me stories about things getting so bad at school board meetings that the district positioned a wall of police officers in front of the board. Someone even threw grapes at a school board member when they announced the closure of 30-some schools. Now, that was back in 2007 at a time when the district was in deep financial turmoil. So now let's fast forward to this moment. What are some of the changes to the public comment process that the board is considering?
Yeah, so I mean, along those lines, there is a great list of kind of like behavior, demeanor, like the way you need to act if you want to participate in this meeting. But some of them are pretty strict. Like if you're carrying a sign, it can't be attached to a stick. It can't be posted on a wall. You have to hold it. You have to sit in the back row. In order to even register for public comment, you have to give like this long list of information about yourself. You have to register before a certain time period, which at the last meeting last week was 11 minutes after the meeting began. So you got to be on time.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, I'll point out, because some school board members are not on time.
Yeah, that's
to
right.
the meeting. We have a clip from a community member, Tavern Joe, talking about the importance of public comment at the meeting.
Detroit deserves a board that is accountable to the people. And the only way the people can hold them accountable is through public comments.
So this could limit a person's ability to make a comment during a school board meeting, Linnell. It certainly presents questions about accessibility when we consider folks who can't make it to the meetings because of, let's say, disability. So, but they want to make their voices heard. So, what do you make of this?
Yeah, have several comments about this. I do have concerns. It does appear as though they're eliminating the option to give virtual public comment, and I do have a great concern about that, like you said. Public meetings are not easily accessible in the first place. Mm-hmm. That is why we have Detroit Documenters. Hello. Right? After COVID in 2020, we all kind of got online. We got on Zoom. That's more commonplace. We're going into 2025 years later. We know that this provides more access for people. So that is definitely a concern for me. The limit on the time period, I definitely have some concerns about as well. It is, I think, common understanding of the Open Meetings Act. Am I going too far?
Oh, no, okay. no, not at all. This is perfect information. Yes.
You can limit how long an individual can speak. Like you got 1 minute, you got 2 minutes, kind of try to manage the overall meeting time. Nobody wants to be there all night, but you can't say, altogether, public comment has 1 hour and that's it. And they do have that written in their bylaws and in this new policy that they're considering. And I do have a concern about that.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we're at the end of our time here. But before we let you go, I know Outlier Media is coming out with a public comment guide next week. What information will people find in the guide?
In 15 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah. You'll find out all this information that I discussed and so much more about like your rights, what rights you have to record the meeting, to be at the meeting. And it also gives some tips about how to use that small amount of time really effectively and give a good public comment.
Perfect. That was Linnell Herden, Detroit Documenters Coordinator. Linnell, as always, thank you so much for being here on the Metro.
Thank you.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Thanks for listening.
Have a great weekend.